Today on CityCast Portland, we're talking about all the weird things washing up on our nearby coastal shores, a local outbreak of shellfish poisoning, and winemakers taking aim at PacifiCorp for their ruined harvest during the 2020 wildfires. And joining me on this week's Friday News Roundup is the always charming Geoff Norcross, co-host of OPB's All Things Considered and the former 15-year host of OPB's Morning Edition. With us is also our sometimes charming, very own executive producer, John Notarianni. It's Friday, May 31st. I'm Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. Geoff, I'll have you know that when I talk about you, I always say that you are the best karaoke. Like you're like the sleeper karaoke hit. Because, you know, at OPB, we used to do a lot of karaoke.
It's true.
And you would just come in and you would just like kill it. You would pick the perfect song, just bring us all together. And
I think the last time you were in the room for karaoke, people were really feeling. This was before the pandemic, and I think there was an election going on, and everything was tense. And I sang "Son of a Bitch" by Nathan Ratliff and the Night Sweats. And as I'm doing it, I'm thinking, yeah, this is landing.
Everybody was singing along. Yeah.
Everybody's feeling the son of a bitch of it all, you know?
It's so true.
Well, thank you for that. I miss those nights.
Welcome, everyone, to the Friday News Roundup. Geoff, John, thank you for being here. And for all of our new listeners, today is the day we break down some of the biggest local stories of the week with some of the best and brightest journalists in town. So this is a very, very special welcome to Geoff, as it's his first time on the show. Geoff, how are you liking your new work schedule?
Oh, wow. It's like everything is in color. For the first time in years. I was getting up at 3 a.m. for a long time there. And that's a sleep debt that I'm still paying off. But I'm beginning to feel like it's going to be okay.
Oh, man. For 15 years, you were the voice of Morning Edition.
Oh, my gosh.
Our favorite Geoff joke at OPB would be to ask you why you were up so late when you would chime in on Slack and it was like 3 p.m. You'd be like, go to bed, Geoff. And you're just like, guys, I'm just trying to tell you something.
I was feeling that Slack FOMO. You know?
You're like, oh, yeah, me too. And we're just like, go to bed.
Yeah, like things don't really get going until 3. It's like, what am I missing?
I loved it. All right. Well, I don't know if you've heard the show before, Geoff, but before we get into the news, I usually ask an opening question so our listeners can get to know our guests a little better. And this week, my opening question is tied to our June guide, which we just unleashed yesterday and confused a ton of people because we said Happy June and it's May. We thought people would understand that we were referring to the guide, but I got a lot of texts from friends who have like medical schedules, you know what I mean? So they don't work every day, and they're just like, what day is it?
We're feeling emotionally, June, so it's okay.
Yeah.
Well, in it, I asked our producers what they look forward to the most during Portland summers, and John said hanging out at rivers, all of them. And I mentioned longer summer days, and Julia, our other producer, shouted out hanging out at the park. So, Geoff, what is the thing you look forward to the most with our Portland summers?
Oh, wow. Well, I'm with John, except maybe a little bit of a change, which is hanging out on rivers, because I am a competitive rower. So I'm on the Willamette, Vancouver Lake all the time. I did, in fact, pull back a little bit from that this year because it got really intense and competitive, and it just stopped being fun, you know. But also I have a tandem kayak, and my wife and I spend a lot of time on the Willamette and on the Tualatin River and the Vancouver Lake. And it's a great way to see the city, you know, from the riverside. And there are just like little hidden delights here and there that you just can't get to unless you're actually on the river. And I love being on the river, especially when it's early summer, when the snow melt has come down off the mountain and the river is just especially bracing. So it's extra incentive to not get into it. But, you know, but you can just kind of feel the heat from above you and the cold from beneath you. And it's like no other feeling in the world.
And I will wave to you from my tube as I lazily float, and you put the work in rowing by. I'll be like, what's up, Geoff?
I will try not to run you both over with my boat.
Yeah, you're sailing now, eh?
Yeah. Get out of the way. Well, Geoff, let's talk about some water, because I know you want to talk about weird stuff that's been washing up on our beaches.
Weird animals.
Okay.
And it's wild. It's kind of like an Aesop fable. There's the bird, the fish, and the whale.
I was thinking it's kind of like a setup for a joke, maybe. Yeah.
They all like washed up into a bar.
Yeah.
Last month there was this Vancouver resident. His name's Michael Sanchez, and he was taking pictures south of Cannon Beach in this place called Hug Point. And he turned around and he saw this one bird down on the beach, and he decided he'd just, take a few shots of it because it was a cool looking bird. He got back to his home and he put the pictures up on his computer, and it looked a whole lot more colorful and interesting than it did on the beach. So he put it online on social media, and he said, "What is this bird? I have never seen it before." And bird internet erupted. They said, "Dude, you just took a picture of a blue rock thrush, which is super rare. It's been seen in British Columbia maybe once, but never in America until like last week. It's common in Southern Europe and Northern Africa, but it's never seen here." Nobody knows why it was here. The researcher that I saw at a piece that the Register Guard put together said maybe it caught a ride on a cargo ship, or maybe it was somebody's pet that escaped its cage, although that's not likely. But another explanation may just be that birds sometimes like to find new flyways for migration, and this one decided to check out America. Interestingly enough, another blue rock thrush was found just off the coast of California just a few days later.
Oh, really?
Maybe it's the same bird.
I love that theory. People were just like, maybe it's the same bird. And other people were just like, maybe it's not. I don't know. It's like science.
Isn't that great? But it also brought to mind just a couple of weeks before, there was this fish that washed up near Cannon Beach. It's called a Pacific football fish. And it's one of those super rare anglerfish that lives deep in the ocean at like 3,000 feet, and that it hunts with like a bioluminescent bulb that's attached to its face, and it lures prey that way. There have been only like 30 other instances of this fish being seen, washed up on the beach up here, whereas humans are. And again, researchers flummoxed, like, why the hell would this fish be ending up here where we are? I read some of the reporting that Lizzie Acker did in the Oregonian. And there's a fun fact about this fish that I found, and here's a quote: "Only females actively hunt. The males are more like parasites."
Yeah, they fuse into their body, and even their organs, everything. They're just receptacles for sperm. And I was like, cool.
And let me do like one addendum to that quote. "Though it's unknown how they find females in the complete darkness without eyes."
Well, is it because the females have that little light?
Yeah.
Do the females find them?
But the males can't see either. I mean, it's...
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I don't know. The females are putting out some vibes down there at 3,000 feet that the boys are able to catch.
And if you see these fish, I mean, they're all vibes.
Yeah.
It is quite a vibe. It's not a vibe. It's an ugly fish. I'm just going to put it out there.
Wow, John. Wow.
No shade, anglerfish.
All fish are beautiful.
When you're at 3,000 feet and there's no light and you have no eyes, it's like...
I don't know, John.
But then there's one more. And that was just this week. A whale, humpback whale, washed up near Manzanita, which is actually not all that uncommon. This is not a rare thing. But you know what it did is it kicked up the questions about how we're going to dispose of it. And that...
Blow it up.
Yeah.
Blow it up. Blow it up. It's an Oregon tradition.
Well, do you think we need to tell that story?
How do people not know this? I feel like it should be the first thing you do when you move to this state is just like, by the way, we like to blow up whales here.
Should be a mural at the new PDX.
Really should.
Can I tell it, though? Because I just
go for it.
I love it. It was November 1970. This 45-foot sperm whale watches up near Florence. And at the time, the highway division was in charge of beaches. And so they were having this discussion about how are they going to remove it. And so somebody came up with the idea, let's blow it up. Because maybe we'd have smaller pieces that we could carry away. And then the really small pieces would get carted off by scavengers. It's actually not a crazy idea, but the craziness came when they started thinking about how much dynamite that they would use. And clearly they erred on the side of more power because they used a ton of dynamite. And on November 12th, 1970, to much fanfare with a lot of cameras rolling.
Yeah, there's footage of this, you guys. There's footage.
There's a story on K2. Reporter Paul Lindman put together a story that's still online, and it's going to live forever in our hearts because it's the most wonderful thing ever. They blew up this sperm whale with a ton of dynamite. And then there was this eruption of blood and blubber into the sky. Mm-hmm. And people were, gathered to watch this, and they cheered for a minute, and then they started running, screaming for their lives. Nobody was hurt, but one car did have its roof caved in by a 3-foot chunk of whale that landed on it.
It's so funny. I swear to God, I know it's not this footage, but in my head I hear, oh, the humanity, even though I know that was for the Heidenberg, but still.
Oh, the whaleness of it all.
Yeah.
And just one more little note about this. This was on November 12th, 1970. It just so happens that is the same day that Olympic skater Tonya Harding was born. And this needs to be an Oregon holiday, y'all.
Oh my God, you're right. We really should be celebrating Tanya's birthday and the idea of sticking 1 ton of dynamite inside a dead whale.
Yeah, but you're right. Every time a whale shows up on our beach, the first question we have is,
we're going to blow it up?
We're going to blow it up.
We're going to blow it up, right? I thought it was funny that the person who found the Pacific football fish didn't give it to the aquarium for preservation. Because, you get to keep it. And I'm just like, what are they doing with it? Yeah. What are they going to do? If I found that, I'd be like, here, if an aquarium came and they're like, oh, this is so rare, can we have it? I'd be like, sure. Can I have some tickets? I don't know. I would do a trade, I would do, but I wouldn't keep it. What would I do with a dead fish that you can't eat,
Yeah, I guess that's fair.
But did you also hear of the tar balls that are washing up on the Oregon coast?
I did, and they at this point they still haven't figured out what caused it. It was like a shipwreck or something that may have happened out there, and then just this is just detritus from that wreck, maybe.
Yeah, I wonder if all of this stuff though is heralding, and this is just for you, Geoff. Do you think this is all heralding the end of times? Is this our oarfish warning?
Since you are the expert on this story, please.
Is the world ending?
I don't think so. I was actually thinking about this, and I kept wondering if there was maybe a climate change through line through all of the stories. I think the story here is that, the Pacific Ocean is big and it's mysterious. It's like a black box of secrets sometimes. And every now and again, it'll give up one of its secrets. And so I think it's a privilege to live next to this huge, mysterious body of water, but sometimes it's important to be humbled by it because it'll give you something that can be confusing and flummoxing and sometimes scary.
Well said.
I'm thinking of it as the weirdest vending machine of all time. It's you get a beautiful rare bird. You get a giant dead whale.
You get tar balls, So be good, or the Pacific will throw up something that you don't want in your life.
The ocean as a malevolent Santa Claus.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's take a quick break here. And when we come back, more headlines of the week. Well, before we get back into this week's headlines, I wanted to share an update and a correction to a story we covered a couple weeks back. During a midweek roundup, I brought up the city's approved $8.2 billion budget and stated that the Portland Clean Energy Fund made up around $177 million of that. But I said it went to the general fund specifically because I was quoting a published report stating that very same thing. After some digging, we found out that the number was correct, but that money went to the overall city budget, not just the general fund, and some of those PSEF funds that are going to the overall city budget, in some cases, were also not just budgeted for this fiscal year, but were incorporated into a 5-year budget plan. And we are not only correcting what I said here, the report we got it from has also been corrected. So a big thank you to our listener, Jim L., for writing in and putting us on the hunt for the more correct statement. We also had 2 listeners that became just as curious as me as to why our city budget was so big, say compared to other cities, especially Boston, whose overall city budget is almost half of ours, and we have very similar populations. Both Barry P. and Scott H. did some research and found out the size of the actual city, not just the people. Our city's budget ends up looking a bit more like every other city since we have more roads and facilities to maintain. So for anyone who flipped out, like me, because of these comparisons, there is hope that not all of our taxes or city fees are getting flushed down some sort of administrative vortex.
We just got a lot of roads and sewers.
We got a lot of parks, baby. When we get stuff like this, like I love our listeners, Geoff. Like we hear from people about what we said so much, and like it really just makes us feel like we're all in this together. Like we're all just trying to solve this puzzle, just local government.
It's good to be humble too, because, there's always somebody listening who knows a ton more about this than you do.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's awesome.
It is awesome.
What I love is they come in humble. No one ever comes in and like, yeah, idiot. They're just like, I think it's this way, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, this week for my headline, I'm also looking at the coast. We're ocean twinsies, Geoff.
Yeah.
As longtime listeners might know, the CityCast Portland team are big shellfish fans. We've even had Flying Fish Company owner Leif Gildersleeve on the show to talk about crabbing, clamming, and shellfish harvesting. So I wanted to make sure that any other shellfish-loving listener out there knew that the Oregon Health Authority put out a health alert. I can't speak this morning.
Shellfish is like the hardest word to say in the world.
It screws up every other word you say afterwards.
Yeah, shellfish.
OHA put out a health alert this past Monday to warn people from harvesting mussels from our North Oregon coast. So mussels gathered from Short Beach near Oceanside, Seaside, and Hug Point, where that bird was spotted, over this past weekend, sickened at least 20 people. And they're pointing to paralytic shellfish poisoning as the reason. As of today, I Googled it. People have been hospitalized, but there have been no deaths reported. I looked at the symptoms, and it seems awful, you guys.
Yeah.
Within 30 to 60 minutes of eating something contaminated, you get a tingling and a numbing in your face, lips, tongue, arms, legs, loss of control of your appendages, difficulty breathing, nausea, a sense of floating, which sounds kind of cool, but I'm sure altogether not awesome. And then diarrhea, vomiting, and a headache. At the end, too, you're like, and my head hurts. Like, awful.
So it's like ayahuasca.
That's pretty much exactly like ayahuasca. So, yeah, watch out, you guys, because I know a lot of people, when they harvest, they tend to put stuff in the freezer. And so if you grabbed anything this weekend, throw it out. And also just to say, like, they're saying mussels, but, like, any shellfish can be affected. So that means crabs, clams, scallops, oysters, literally anything that you harvested this past week in the areas I mentioned, toss it out. I didn't know this, but it's algae blooms. That's what's infecting all this.
Yeah, and there I go thinking there's climate change at work here. Is there any evidence that the bloom is worse because of?
Oh yes, for sure. Actually, most algae blooms occur because of warm, stagnant water, and so the water has been a little warmer alongside the coast, and we've had better weather, I suppose, so that creates these red tides, because that's what the algae bloom colors the coast with, is red. And it's dinoflagellate algae is the red tide algae specifically. Dinoflagellate. Can you say that? Dinoflagellate.
Dinoflagellate.
So easy. You guys made it look so easy. Never mind.
Jeff and I have spent a long time, both of our careers, reading hard words off paper.
Right. When I was looking into this story, and I learned something that I didn't know. There is actually a U.S. National Office for Harmful Algal Blooms.
What?
Yeah, government funded. I mean, they that didn't come from nowhere. Apparently, this is a big enough problem that we got to have a layer of government oversight.
Yeah.
Well, I got really curious about this too. And, I think just the name really freaked me out. Paralytic shellfish poisoning.
Yeah.
I was like, that is scary. So I did some research into it. And do you know the worst ever outbreak of paralytic shellfish poisoning? It happened in 1987 in Japan. It's known as the Ishikawa outbreak. It poisoned 13,000 people because of contaminated clams.
Oh.
So, I mean, it's scary, but it's not uncommon. This is something that just, the algae occurs naturally, and every now and then there's like a huge surge of this.
Yeah, we're all kind of rolling the dice whenever we eat any kind of shellfish. I actually have a friend who has a rule: only eat shellfish in months that have an R in it.
Yeah, that's the old adage for sure. Yeah.
Once you get into the spring and the summer, it's like, don't go there.
Yeah, but I don't know. Did you guys hear about the Alaskan rivers turning orange because of like mineral and metal deposits?
Oh God,
from the surrounding melting permafrost. Okay, so when I was Googling this, because I was like, oh no, what else can't I eat? It brought up that the Alaskan rivers right now, they're like bright orange, and that is definitely climate change because melting permafrost, and a lot of people thought it was like pollution or whatever, and it's like, no, that's just a lot of minerals and a lot of metal deposits. So I'm just curious what that's going to do to our coasts as well,
Yeah.
because that's eventually going to come down.
Is that anything that melts off the coast of Alaska eventually show up down
That's
here?
what I think, because we're down here. This is the way it works, Geoff. They're up there and we're down here.
It's just gravity.
And like they're the attic, and if they were to drop a marble, it would fall to our part of the house. Do you see how that?
I don't think that's how it works.
Geoff, I'm pretty sure. There's just an oceanographer. There's somebody listening being like, oh, idiots. Oh, man. Awesome. Well, what about you, John? What were you looking into this week?
Yeah, I'm moving a little bit inland from the coast to the Willamette Valley, based on some reporting by Claire Rush at AP and Elizabeth Hayes at the Portland Business Journal. Plus, the first time I've used Wine Enthusiast magazine as a source. Some reporting from Sean Sullivan. So, the 2020 Labor Day fires were like a huge disaster, one of the worst in Oregon's history. Burned like nearly 1,900 square miles, 5,000 homes and other structures. Well, the utility company PacifiCorp was found guilty of negligence last year for not sort of shutting off its power during a windstorm. And that's leading to a bunch of lawsuits and damages. In December, the utility paid about $550 million to settle a few claims. And there's just like dozens and dozens of them out there that could account for billions of dollars. But the one that I'm interested in is just recently 40 Oregon wineries and vineyards sued PacifiCorp for about $100 million because of smoke taint. The soot and the smoke damaged all these grapes and just like really decimated the harvest. This was a suit that was filed in Multnomah County Circuit Court. And it's a big deal for the wine industry and like a bellwether of where the wine industry, not just in Oregon, but like everywhere is going. As climate change continues, as more fires happen, like grapes are super, super susceptible to like the flavor of smoke getting inside of them. And it is just really nasty.
John, I remember you had a conversation with somebody when you were with OPB about smoky wines after a wildfire season. And some people actually kind of like it, because it adds a layer of complexity and a taste that they kind of go for. But mostly they're weirdos. Everybody else has a sip. And I think the quote was, it's like licking an ashtray.
Licking an ashtray was the classic one. I found a better one. This guy who's a winemaker in Australia said, it's not just like a subtle waft of wildfires. It tastes like burnt sausage in an ashtray. Burnt salami served in an ashtray is what they described. And apparently like certain winemakers, so, Oregon wineries didn't get hit quite as bad as like the California wineries did, which means that the wine that did survive, the prices went through the roof. So like certain vineyards actually produced some of this smoke wine and would like give people a taste of it to be like, look, you don't want this. It's disgusting. It's really, really bad. Taste this. This is why this other bottle costs twice as much.
It's like, ooh, gross. Try this.
Did you see what one winemaker did with her damaged grapes? It's kind of ingenious. She turned it into whiskey. So
yeah.
Patricia Green Cellars, they're known for Pinot Noir and Sauvignon Blanc wines. They hooked up with a distiller, like an Oregon distiller, and they're just like, yo, you want some smoky grapes? And they made it into like whiskey wine.
That's great.
Yeah.
The winemakers out here are some of the most creative and flexible people because they are on the front lines of climate change. I mean, the grapes are fussy, and they're going to do what they're going to do. And so when you bring them in, you gotta make delicious wine one way or the other. And if that's not going to work, you make whiskey. Have you had it? this grape whiskey with
No.
hints of wildfire?
Well, so this is what happened is that, because, it has to go through a distillation process and it's whiskey. So it has to be called whiskey, has to be, X amount of years or whatever, aged a certain. So it just came out like earlier this year. But no, I have not had it. I do want to try it out. But yeah, if anyone listening has had this whiskey from Patricia Green Cellars, I know it's a collaboration. So it's like Big Wild Spirits or something.
Yeah.
Let us know what it tasted like.
Yeah, Patricia, if you're out there listening, hook it up. Yeah,
I'm intrigued. I really want to try this thing.
If you're the distiller and you're hearing this and you want John, Geoff, and myself to try it out, we will definitely record a special episode just for it. We'll go through the whole bottle.
For research.
For research.
Yeah.
I mean, it is interesting, though, because, again, it's not just Oregon that's dealing with this. It's the entire world struggling with wildfires contaminating wine. So there's actually a bunch of research that has been going on in Oregon at Oregon universities to try and find ways to get around this as well. And Oregon State has actually been one of the leaders in doing some of this research. Back in 2023, they got together with Washington State and discovered a new class of compounds that contribute to that smoky flavor. Then this year, they say they've developed a spray coating that can kind of block the chemical compounds that are known to cause that smoke taint. And they're hoping that in a couple seasons, they're going to have this spray that, let's say there's a wildfire that's burning, 10 miles away. Conceivably, a vineyard could spray this special coating on their grapes, and it could protect them.
I'm curious about the winemakers, why they were focusing on PacifiCorp, because those fires, you can't lay all of the blame at the feet of the utility. I'm just curious what their legal strategy was there.
I mean, I think it's just the precedent that a jury found PacifiCorp to be negligent, right? And so, if you're going to sue someone, you sue the entity that has already been found legally responsible for the fires. I mean, $100 million sounds like a ton of money, obviously. But in April, there was another lawsuit that was filed that could be worth up to $30 billion in legal settlements. I mean, this hasn't gone through yet, but everyone's just sort of going after the entity that has the sort of legal responsibility at this point.
Makes sense.
You guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me and talking about climate change. That's what I feel like.
Pretty much. That is the sort of common thread through all three of these, right?
We did not plan on that. It just happened.
I know. Yeah.
If you take anything away from what we all just said is smoky wine, try it. Who knows? Ocean, check it out. You never know what you're going to get.
If you want to have the weirdest dinner date of all time, smoky wine and paralytic mussels, get at it.
Football fish, bits of whale, and a smoky wine.
Yeah.
But no mussels, because, we don't want that in our life.
Yeah. And please throw out anything that you harvested this week or past week. Just don't do it. Don't do it. John, you have something you wanted to plug before we left.
Yeah, I just wanted to plug something that our buddies at CityCast Denver have been working on. They've been going really deep, focusing on a new series about their Congresswoman, Lauren Boebert. If you don't know the name off the top of your head, you've certainly heard the headlines about her. Very sort of controversial, right-leaning conservative. She's the person who heckled Joe Biden at the State of the Union. You might have heard about this bizarre theater vaping incident that happened last year. Well, they got really interested in who this person really is. And they have this new series called Lauren Boebert Can't Lose. They're talking to her friends, her former rivals. They even met with Boebert herself at her home. They met her mom, and they're doing just a really interesting deep dive on who this person is and what it means for Colorado and ostensibly for the country. If you're a fan of CityCast, check out Lauren Boebert Can't Lose. Tomorrow, they're dropping a new episode about her background running a gun-themed restaurant. And new episodes are coming out every Wednesday. You heard the first episode, right, Claudia?
I did. I enjoyed it. I was confused because, to be honest, when I saw what the show was about, I was like, I'm sorry, is this pro like, I didn't understand, like, what was going on. Like, I was like, what is happening at CityCast Denver? Like, what are they doing? But then I heard it and I was like, oh, this is really cool, actually. Like, this is really interesting. Part of me wonders, like, are they going to get a cease and desist? Like, this is going in pretty deep, you know?
Well, if it's successful, I mean, I'm curious if you guys might be interested in doing a deep dive from somebody on our congressional delegation and who that might be.
I think it would be Earl Blumenauer, Smokes Cannabis. Would be our series.
It would be Earl, it'd be some cannabis, and it would be a smoky bottle of whiskey wine.
You know he'd totally be into that.
It would not be a 5-part series. It would just be a 2-hour episode. And at the end, we would be like, I don't know why we did this. Well, thanks so much, Geoff. We've been looking forward to having you ever since John said, hey, Jeff's going to be on the show. We were just like, yes.
Such a pleasure, you guys. Thank you so much. It was great to see you and hang with you for a little bit.
That's all for today here on CityCast Portland. Thank you so much for listening. Our executive producer is John Notarianni. Our producers this week are Julia Fiaioni, Selena C.A. Reynolds, and Natalie Rivera. Our newsletter editor is Rachel Monahan, and our host is me, Claudia Meza. Original music by Jenny Conley and Stephen Drizos. Additional music by Epidemic Sound and All the Kimonos. We'll be back Monday morning with more from around the city. Until then, see you at Slim's.